It's early evening on the busy main street in El Cajon, and a group of men are sitting around playing checkers and cards in a Middle Eastern restaurant. In a small storage room behind the restaurant, a group is gathered, but they're not playing games. They spread bus maps out on the table and speak in Arabic about what they want to see in the city's climate action plan. Mohamed Touama is running the meeting. He moved from Iraq to El Cajon 10 years ago and now is very involved in local politics. He says the switch to district elections helped spur the Middle Eastern community to get involved in the districting process.
It was just like an achievement for us from community that is not involved to a community that is actually involved.
District elections are meant to increase diversity on city councils by allowing minority communities to elect someone from their neighborhood. Now, Touama and others are preparing for the November 2020 election. That's when his district, which contains a big chunk of the Middle Eastern community, will get to vote on its first council member.
We're welcoming anyone who, even if it's not from our community, but someone who cares. But we're looking for someone from our community.
El Cajon is one of 5 local cities that have switched to district elections, but have not seen a boost in diversity on their city councils. But it may be too soon to make that call. That's because in all 5 of those cities, the first district election was only last year. They may need more time and more elections to diversify, and all 5 will have their next chance in 2020. In El Cajon, Touama says his community is still looking for a candidate.
We have someone, but we're trying to see if that person can be more involved, because we don't really. It's not only about someone from our community, but we need someone who's really knowledgeable.
If their candidate is a Democrat, they may have some help.
It's a game changer in many of the smaller cities.
Will Rodriguez Kennedy is chair of the San Diego County Democratic Party. He says district elections not only increase diversity, they also largely help Democrats.
Moving to district elections is more representative. It also means that communities of color and other marginalized communities will have more of a vote share in terms of their districts, which is obviously better for everyone, but also better for the Democratic Party.
Although all local city council seats are nonpartisan, Rodriguez Kennedy says in reality it doesn't actually play out that way. And part of the Democratic Party's strategy will be focusing on these smaller cities in the next election. That, he hopes, will gain Democrats more seats on the local transit agency, SANDAG.
Which means we need to start paying attention and investing in smaller cities in the north and the east.
But do minority voters always vote as a bloc? That assumption is often true, though not always, according to Zoltan Heinl, a political science professor at UC San Diego. He calls this racially polarized voting.
African Americans are in many ways the most polarized voting bloc. So they tend to vote overwhelmingly liberal, Democratic, whereas whites tend to vote more Republican and conservative. And so there's a big gap, even at the local level, between the preferences of African Americans and the preferences of whites in most circumstances. There's often a smaller gap between the preferences of Latinos and Asian Americans on one hand, and white American preferences in terms of the vote.
And he says it's often true that minority groups are more likely to vote for Democrats.
Republicans who are Latino or African American or Asian American typically get very few Black or Latino or Asian American votes.
And he adds, if maps are drawn where minorities are too concentrated in 1 or 2 districts, it may actually limit the chance to elect even more diverse councils.
Essentially, those districts will be the overwhelmingly liberal districts, and then you might actually elect more conservative Republicans. And if you're a minority and you're liberal, that may or may not be a good thing.
But in El Cajon, Mohamed Touama's focus is getting just one person from his community elected. He says there are some projects he wants to see tackled. For example, making El Cajon more walkable and using more roundabouts, which people from the Middle East are used to.
Back home, we all have roundabouts because it keeps cars moving, and that would use a lot of gas emission. It was complicated for local community to accept roundabouts because they never drove in a roundabout. So we actually had to show a video of how a roundabout works.
He says if they had a council person from the Middle East, they wouldn't have to explain. that person would just understand what they're talking about. Claire Trageser, KPBS News.